please be seated. My name is Ralph Keel. I'm the University Librarian at Victoria University in Melbourne, not the one in Wellington. This session is called Connectivity, Creating and Challenging the Future of Work, with a question mark at the finish. And this is a concurrent session in digital transformation, and we're in the orange room, just to make sure you're where you want to be. Our speaker is from the University of Auckland, and his name is Darl Kolb, and he'll probably introduce himself a little bit further. So please welcome Darl.
Okay, great. Thank you all. I do see some familiar faces out here, and for anyone else who's visiting, welcome to Auckland. Despite my just-off-the-boat accent, I've been here for 25 years in New Zealand and working all that time in the business school. So I'm not a technology expert, but I suppose it is true that for about the last 15 years I've been working on this idea of connectivity, and in the last couple of years I get asked to speak a little bit about the future of work, and so that's what I want to talk about today. Again, this audience probably knows more about the technical aspects of education than I do, but I hope to traverse a bit of educational philosophy as well. So the question is, with what I might think of connectivity 2.0 as beyond the digital native to the point where students and our future students are truly embedded in technologies, and where does that leave us as we think about their futures or work to help them achieve that future? Many of us, I think, would agree, at least as I get older and I catch up with friends that I grew up with, we agree that at least our counseling, our school counselors were pretty, well, not useless, but what they had to suggest or offer us as young students was not particularly helpful in terms of where we've all ended up. And that was in a much less digitally enhanced age. And so we can get it really wrong in terms of projecting what we think our students will need in the future. And I'm sure one of the challenges of this conference is to try to imagine that future on their behalf and then try to prepare and work with them to get them there. It starts earlier and earlier. As I've been speaking to people who now are living with grandkids offshore, they say that, you know, the magic is all happening through FaceTime and through Skype, and our connections with others are more and more and earlier are digital and mediated, and that's fine. We introduce ourselves to the world through media, and that's fine. But again, this interface is happening more and more, and again, no one's going to be surprised about that. You also won't be surprised to know that this extension can be seen as completely socio-material, where our social and our connections are closer and closer to the devices that we use. And from an organizational point of view, this is one of the things we're studying actually, is how media use and media flow, for example, will affect work, well-being, etc. And so this closeness of relationship is something we take for granted. There is, however, a duality here where for all the connects, there are some disconnects going on too, that there's a solitude, in some cases alienation, and to some extent we're more disconnected for all our connectivity. And so this is kind of the problem, on one hand, of the socio-material elements of humans growing up with technologies. On the other hand, if our baby humans are growing up, so is our artificial intelligence, and I will take a moment to brag on behalf of my colleagues if you haven't seen this. So we'll look at a little video. This is from the artificial intelligence group at our bioengineering school here, to just get a sense of where we're coming in terms of machine learning and machine intelligence that goes well beyond the smartphone. So if we can just look at the video, please.
Face. It's our primary means of communication. Yeah. But it's been untapped in terms of a human-computer interface.
How can I help you?
A computer can express itself to you in a human-like way, which is emotional, it's cognitive.
No. No.
That's when you start getting to this sort of interesting place.
Going to see an AI baby on a sunny afternoon.
The fellow you meet next is a madman in the best possible way.
You're going to pull the muscles which basically lower the brow.
He's Mark Sager, a computer scientist at the University of Auckland.
So nose wrinkler would be, yeah, let's do the nose wrinkler. Punch his nose up.
Mark became famous for building super detailed simulations of the human body and ended up winning a couple of Oscars for his work on films like Avatar and King Kong.
So let's go here and, you know.
These days, Mark is, how to put this, trying to reverse engineer the human brain. He's built a series of simulations around how the human face moves, how we express emotion, and how our neurons fire.
We're trying to build a computer which has experiences, can imagine, and basically it has its own sort of existence in a way. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to run Baby X. What we're building here is a computer that can learn. So this is Baby. She's sort of looking at us and hearing us. So if I make a loud noise, you know, she'll get a fright. This is what she can see. So you can see my face here. Hey, see that? Right. So she's not copying my smile, she's responding to me. And now this is her little baby's first word book. So you can pick a page, you know, show her something, but she has to be looking at it. So get her attention.
Hi, baby. Hi. 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 What do you see? What's this?
Puppy.
Puppy. Very good. What's that, baby?
Apple.
This is because we're in New Zealand, you've got to show her a sheep.
Yeah, I'll give her the word, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, baby. Hi. What do you see, baby?
Sheep.
Sheep. Very good, baby.
One of the long-term goals is, can we create a computational model of consciousness? Because then you can go, okay, the computer model has just become conscious of something. Is that thought or not?
Yeah.
Now, all the facial expressions, everything's driven by neural nets. So as we look around, what I'm going to do now is remove her face, basically. And so this is what's driving in the background. And so what you're looking at now, these are all the connections lighting up, right, as the baby's doing stuff.
And this is like a simulation of what would be happening in a person's brain.
Yeah, because if you're going to make a character biological and behave naturally, then you've got to use a natural model. So that's the sort of what's going on inside Baby X. Now we take this stuff and we now connect it to cognitive computing systems. So you've got biological neural networks connected to artificial intelligence models, and the potential for that's enormous. That's where the future's probably going to be.
Maybe.
Okay, so this is where, in business schools, where usually we come in, is the concern about jobs being lost to computers. And if you haven't, unless you've been sort of living in a cave in the last year, you've certainly seen these headlines. Robots are coming, computers are going to take our jobs. And it's being taken seriously right here in Australia and New Zealand. This is a quote from one of the bankers not long ago, last year, taking this very seriously. And if you talk, because a lot of my MBA students are working in those kinds of service fields, you find that the bankers for sure are doing automation, lawyers are doing automation, airlines are doing automation. So the issue now is becoming very real, looking very much at artificial intelligence and automation. Now the bankers might actually have a little bit to worry about. If you haven't read, this is, there's several books here I'm going to recommend. This is one that's a fantastic read, scary, frightening, absolutely. Won't make you believe in bankers anymore, but it'll certainly blow your hair back in terms of technology. And it's the story of high-frequency trading in Wall Street. And, of course, technology can't give us ethics or morals, but it also demonstrates how difficult it is for humans to keep up with machines, which is one of the problems. And the other day, actually, the other night, actually, at an MBA dinner, we were talking about a particular problem. So I had someone across the table from one of our airlines and someone from one of our telephone companies who now call themselves a technology company. And I was explaining how after 20 years of paying my telephone bill, they lost my service on a day when a local, this wasn't an outsourced person at all, had no agency or ability, discretion to give me a data cap because I bought a new Mac and I need a little bit more data. She was unable to do that, and we were speculating that a robot would have made a better decision there. It's nice to talk to a human. We all think that, well, talking to a nice Kiwi about our telephone bill. But in actual fact, this person from the telephone company said, yeah, a chat bot would have been able to calculate the amount of revenue they got from me over the years, calculate forwards, and in fact, it would have paid itself back in a month's time, would be a no-brainer for a machine, and somehow or other the human was unable to do this. So if you just kind of multiply that out over all the transactions, every time I rent a car, in fact, the same thing, these people, these humans, perfectly good humans in some cases, they're trying to sell us insurance and do all this stuff and prove who we are. My goodness, you know, what a waste of both their time, my time, etc. If we can't automate some of that, we'd be in bad shape. And of course, again, the sources of most of those headlines come from Brynjolfsson and McAfee's book. If you haven't read it, that encapsulates a lot of this conversation from two economists who look at jobs, including the common wage, etc. And the other great read along this lines is The Glass Cage by Nicholas Carr, especially in medicine, automation, automation of airlines, etc. Fantastic reading, but also gives us a sense of these futures. The particular case they make, of course, is that unlike other periods of automation, in particular artificial intelligence allows us to get rid of a whole different class of worker, and that's why it becomes more serious than just machines making cars, etc. So this is why in business schools, for example, we're a bit concerned, because we mint thousands, literally thousands of accountant students, knowing that accounting take-up is very limited and going down. One example is our dean told us that in 1 year, one of the local accountancy firms in 1 year hired 64 of our graduates, which is cool, and most of them bachelors of accounting. The next year, in 1 year, they hired about 32 of our graduates, and only half of them were accountants. The others were Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, Engineering, etc., philosophers. And so if that's the kind of slope we're on, we who are even creating professional students are in for quite a brutal shock. And you hear this again in law, increasingly in medicine, etc. I'm scheduled to have some surgery this year, and a visitor was saying that in the U.S., the Vinci programs, the robots will actually do an awful lot of the surgery. It comes right down to the critical part, might be still done by the surgeon, but the routine stuff, a lot of the nursing parts, etc., the cauterization is simply done by machines. So for those of us who are in professional schools, we worry about this, and we're afraid that it's all going to be bad news. Now, it's not all bad news, of course, because the good news is some jobs are going to stay. And the question then is what kind of job you have. So if you have a non-routine manual job, like you're a gardener or a chef or any of those kinds of jobs, then you're probably going to be okay. If you have a non-routine cognitive job, like many of us do, and I thankfully do, then I think we'll be okay for a little while, although you could really argue about my job too. But if you have a lot of routine in your job, whether you're well-educated or not, you're going to be in a world of hurt, according to these stats. So routine is not your friend in terms of computing and automation, artificial intelligence. Again, the question for us in this environment of this part of the world, and I don't know so much about Australia, but the problem in New Zealand is that not so much that we don't have tech-savvy people and great students. We have amazing students and great technology. The problem is we have pretty boring professions. You know, milking cows. I grew up on a farm. It's interesting for the first couple of years, but it gets pretty routine. Being an accountant, being a service industry, all the things. Tourism is more interesting, but again, a lot of people don't like the hours, the pay scales, etc. So the question is, can we create interesting, non-routine jobs for our future citizens? One thing that is agreed, now if we turn back to the philosophy of education, one thing we can do is to try to create skills and attributes in our students and the ability to change. So probably training those Bachelor of Accountants is fine as long as they understand that they're only going to be an accountant for a year or two and then they're going to carry on to become something else. As long as they do that, I don't think it's any harm really if your son or daughter is studying for accountancy. It's probably not going to hurt them because they'll go on to be a shiatsu masseuse or you know, a good barista or start a company or do something useful. So as long as we do that, and as long as we instill character skills and abilities, again, that are enduring and transcend the sort of skill sets that, that we currently know about, because with those attributes, students will be able to adapt themselves to the future, whatever it is. And the strongest argument that I found is a book called Humans Are Underrated, and this is not written by an academic, it's written by a journalist, by Forbes magazine editor, and he encapsulates the argument that we really don't have to worry, well, we have to think about automation, artificial intelligence, but there is an argument back that humans do have unique skills that are underrated. And I'll just talk a little bit about what he points out to us there. Uniquely, and notwithstanding what baby X can do, baby X can actually respond to human emotions, but the fundamentals of empathy and being able to relate to humans are actually, if not hardwired, are quite long-lived and quite subtle and nuanced in human beings and more difficult to replicate in artificial intelligence. In fact, the argument that humans had to develop traits on the savannah to survive, and I'm not a Darwinist or anything, but the point would also be made, he says, that we actually had to develop human skills and empathy skills and social skills to survive as much as any of those other characteristics that we sometimes hear about. So we've evolved into this, and that does give us the opportunity to put humans back to work and to have genuine sort of applications. And this is, again, what people really look for in our graduates. That's why people are a lot less worried about the pathway that we take them on, but the person that they actually are and what they're able to bring to the equation. So that all works out pretty well. So in that sense, we need to see education as a connection, not in the technical sense, but in the social sense. I think I don't know the themes that will be going on in the conference, but I think increasingly technology, even though it's very amazing, is still a background issue in education, and as it should be. It should be there reliably for what we want it to do, but not get in the way. A couple years ago, these are actually my students here, some of my students, and they're terrific. They're an international cohort of master's students, and again, what we're doing there is we're taking students who might have a journalism or an arts degree or an engineering degree. One guy was literally a rocket scientist, and he wanted a master's degree in management, and that's what we're offering. A couple years ago, we built these great flat rooms, and they're terrific. But when we were designing the room, they wanted us to put this flat screen, and I knew years ago I used to go to the human interface conferences, and I remembered Microsoft developing these tools. And we pushed back successfully to say that's the last thing we need on these tables is some sort of a device like this. First of all, it wouldn't work, probably. Second of all, it just gets in the way of the actual learning. Now, you might argue, well, they still have laptops there. And in actual fact, I did see something handy the other day, and it was, I forget the name, the type, but it was actually a little tablet that would lie flat, and they could actually use it like that other technology, but they just brought it along. So it was actually cheaper for us, more useful for them. But this way, we can do whatever we want in there. But mostly, they're building networks, and they're building their skills for interaction. And the question is, people come into my classroom, there's a hell of a lot going on, usually a lot of noise, and I'm not usually at the front of the classroom. I'm wandering around doing other things. And so even today, I can be here because my lecture I could forego, because this week we have role plays that are intensive role plays in the boardroom of the business school, and that's what they'll be doing. So now I'm kind of aware of time, I guess. I want to also show you one scary slide. This was taken at Talpackie Primary School, and for those of you who don't know, Talpackie is a very little country sort of town outside of Auckland, not far, very easily commuted. I drive through it every day. I went in there one day not long ago, and this guy on the left is the principal. And he's amazing. He's on his third generation. The school's on their third generation of 3D computers, 3D printers. He said that, yeah, they actually got the maintenance guy to look after the printers because he got interested in them. They're doing all sorts of wild things. And this woman on the right, for example, is what would look like to me as a home ec room. And they still had sewing machines, which I was pretty impressed by or interested in. Anyway, they were sewing things, but the difference is, from when we had home ec in my day, is they were doing a subject theme of bike safety or safety. And these little 9-year-old kids were sewing the material, making the gloves. And then they were programming LED lights with program language to make the lights do different things, and etc. And they were being taught by 11-year-olds. They're mentored, so peer-to-peer learning. And why this is frightening is that in 10 years' time or less, those students are going to be in our classrooms, and what can we possibly do in a business school that's as interesting as what they were doing at that age? And this is where, in higher education at least, I think primary and high schools do a much better job of this, but higher education in New Zealand, I think, we still are using old techniques that are not necessarily teaching for the future, and certainly not even meeting the demands of students coming out of high schools. Now, the other deeper philosophical question here, too, is what do we make of life? And I think the other factor is that we don't want technologies to get in the way of the life we actually have in front of us. And I think that while curating life is important and reflecting on it, all the things we as educators want done, we have to make sure that people are living the life as they come to it. And I think this is the other challenge that we struggle with. We want our students to have an intense experience, but we sometimes rush to take that intensity away by making it an assignment or not realizing they're actually living that life as they go through it. And this goes back to my former life. I was an Outward Bound instructor for 10 years, and one of the things we learned from Kurt Hahn, the founder of the Outward Bound movement, is it's not excellence that Hahn was about, and excellence is not Outward Bound's goal. It's the pursuit of excellence. And if you know that at the top of a mountain or at the pinnacle of our careers even, it isn't being there that's important. It's the struggle, it's the pursuit of the lofty goal that makes us better people. And I think we forget that in education. Our students sort of learn the game that being the best, getting the A is the thing. And actually, it's what you do to get the A that makes you the better, that makes you the A student. So to keep that pursuit in mind, and again, with lots of pressures from parents, society, etc., is important. So I've been thinking about intelligence a bit differently, and different kinds of intelligence to pay attention to. So on one hand, obviously, there's cognitive intelligence, which is still important. I mean, again, this is where machines are going to do a better job. They're actually smarter than us in most ways in cognitive intelligence. The machine comes in quite quickly, going back to the point that we're now seeing the machine age very much interacting with our own thinking abilities. But then, of course, there's the social element to learning, has always been and is very robust. But if we add the experiential as then the experience of being in a social world with machines that help us and maintaining our sort of connection with our own learning with ourselves and our community, that's, I think, important. And ultimately, as we heard earlier, the EQ, the emotional quotient that we come away with as humans, is still something quite valuable and quite unique. So that's the proposition. And again, I think that I once had someone describe that something as interesting as a jungle gym or this kind of gymnasium seems, on one hand, very engaging, possibly adventurous, and maybe in quite physical perhaps. So it has lots of good attributes to it. But if you decode it a little bit and unpack it, what it also says about the world is a fixed place. It's been put there before you came. It's not going away. You're not going to take it away. You're not going to change it much. It has a little bit of danger, but pretty soon you practice your way through. You get to the top. Next time you do it, it's pretty much the same thing. What kind of world does this sort of symbolize is something to think about. And I think that in the technology space, at least, there's still, I heard the panel before, though, talking about not taking perfection and locking everything down as the standard we judge ourselves by, but for a lot of my life, it seems like technology wants to be perfect, be there for us, fixed so we can't hurt it or can't touch it. And again, to me, that all just sends it into the back office or something I avoid. And sends a signal to me that I'm not very much in control with most technologies, unfortunately. So I think we need our students, and possibly metaphorically, we as technologists and educators, to think more like the sandbox. The sandbox has it's lower tech even than the gym. It has no processed metals, no bolts, no moving parts. It's basically just sand in a box. But the possibilities of what can be created in a sandbox are endless, and they're also malleable, and they can be taken away, they can be shaped, and they can be reshaped many, many, many times. And so that suggests the world that I think our students are going into, more of a sandbox world. And unfortunately, we as teachers don't often come to the sandbox. We're great at building higher and bigger and more structured jungle gyms. And hope that our students get to the top, but ultimately I think we'd be better off thinking about being partners in the sandbox if we're going to have them learn and indeed fail. One of the things I think also, this is not a technical thing, but in my class, which has a business simulation, which happens to be online, one of the great things the students savor is the ability to fail. These are high-performing students. I sometimes say, all we have to do is kind of stay out of the way and not hurt them, and they're going to do fine. But most of them haven't experienced much failure, and so when a stock report comes out every Monday at the end of my lecture, someone's at the top, someone's at the bottom. That's the way it is. If your team sucks, your team sucks, and they love it. And I've been doing this for almost 20 years, about 30 or so semesters, and every time it just has a life of its own and has this ability to fail as part of its essence. That's it for me, I think. Any questions? Oh, no.
That's fabulous, Darl. I'm just wondering if anyone's got any questions. I've certainly got one, but I can't see any hands up. No one's waving. Okay.
Sure.
My question is, are you an optimist or are you a pessimist when it comes to what seems to me in the world of work to be humans against machines?
Good question, and I think it's probably fair to say there are both. There's optimists and pessimists. I'm generally an optimist, so I guess in this case I am optimistic, in part because as I hear back from students who have gone out in the world and made their way, I'm always optimistic on the human ability to adapt and to reshape and to reform what we do in spite of where we came from. So going back to my complaint about not having great guidance counselors, I still manage to get by in life. And I have faith that my students will do well. It might not be what their parents imagined, it might not be what they imagined, but I generally am an optimist. However, when you read the stuff, there's a lot of pessimists saying this time will be different, and it may be very different. In fact, when I gave these talks, I gave some other similar talks in Australia last year, and they were alumni talks, and so everyone's upbeat about U of A being in Melbourne and Sydney, but the conversation kind of got down to this joblessness and systematic loss of jobs, and it was quite, not totally dark, but there was a lot of pessimism there. And I think it's justified to some extent. So, yeah. Yes.
Yes.
One question, non-routine. Doesn't AI and machine learning actually start to redefine what we think jobs are non-routine, but then they're not when AI gets better?
Yeah, I think that's right. If we think of routine as putting bolts in a hole or something, I mean, even the robots can do that. But if we think of how many times have I done this, and I'll tell you the one that still kind of blows me away. Most of this you sort of get immune to after a while. But recently, a friend has a son who wants to be an engineer, and typically, I'm sort of a generation, I always say, we're not worthy, we're not worthy. You know, engineers are still gods to us management people because they're smarter and all that. But she's actually worried that engineering is susceptible to this because, again, has a lot of routine elements to it. And so I agree that what we define as routine, we need to be thinking through because that seems to be growing and growing. Yeah. Good point.
One quick question. Yes, Jared.
The really hard question, Darl, is the economic one. If you don't have people doing jobs, how do they become consumers? So I wonder if you'd share your perspective on that issue, which I guess is the same issue as the wealth being held by a very small proportion of the population and middle class vanishing and so on. I mean, you're from business school. The economic dimension of what you've been talking about, would you comment on that?
Well, yes, with the caveat that I'm not an economist, but I will remind, too, that the book that's made this impact is written by economists, and I agree. I think the implications are both economic and, I would say, and sociological. So, again, what meaning and work are so entwined as in society and for humans. Yes, and again, I don't have a strong view of, like the living wage, I don't have views on that, but I do know that it will come down to some of that. And the other confounding factor is that leads us to this pessimistic Mad Max future is that we have also an economy, a winner-take-all economy. So again, back to New Zealand, even the routineness of selling things, if Amazon really settles in, suddenly you have, again, even something that we used to shopkeepers and retail. So I'm not naive that there could be this roll-up to where, again, maybe there are obviously some little shops and some niches, but economically, structurally, because I think one of the things we know about New Zealand is that the structure of the economy matters. If you have dairy and you have tourism, and then all the rest, that structure defines a lot of what we have to work with, capital and wealth-wise. And similarly, I think if the professional services disappear, we'd be struggle to say, well, what do we do here? So that's not answering it, but those are the implications that are definitely there. And even in education, if people start saying, well, already I would suspect they'll start questioning, as my friend did, should I send my son or daughter to engineering school, or should I send them to a business school, should I send them to whatever? I mean, we may see trends and patterns even for educators in terms of selection, yeah.
Look, I don't want to get you in the delay your lunch. So it is lunchtime. So please put your hands together for Darl for a really interesting session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, great. Cool. Thank you.
Scary. I'm supposed to have